So I brought both of those things today.
Do you do them both at the same time?
No, both of them take two hands. But I sing and play harp at the same time. But, one of the things, speaking of, that I have been noticing is that props to the MBTA, the journey between Harvard and Park Street and has gotten markedly quicker.
Between where and where you said?
Especially between Harvard and Park Street, but I believe there's been some speed ups as a result of the floating slab project, which will be continuing until the sun burns out. But yeah, red line, there's not as many slow zones on the red line in the Cambridge-Dorchester tunnel, and it's just a overall faster and more reliable trip. So yeah, red line's about as fast as it was in the 1910s now.
Okay, I just confirmed, just to make things really very meta and very Inception-like, we are live on YouTube, and I'm now going to take the YouTube screen away from the screen share because that's just too twisted. Everyone ready to kick this off officially?
Yes.
All right.
Sir.
Wig, would you mind doing the honors of calling us to order and getting things going? That way I can keep my eyes on the technical bits for the next couple of minutes.
Sure. So I'm Wig Zamor, and I help Stefan as co-chair. He does all the hard work for this period of time. Do we want to do brief introductions, or do we want to go right to public comments?
Actually, let's do introductions. Because Doug hasn't joined us since February. I checked back in our meeting archives. He hasn't joined us since February of 2020, our last public meeting in person before the pandemic started, which is not a fault of his that he hasn't joined us, of course. We just haven't asked him to join us for something that he covers. So yeah, let's do a round of introductions because it's been a while.
Okay.
For people who don't remember, Doug was presenting material along with Alexandra Markowitz the last time. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Wig.
Okay, well, why don't we start with Doug and Emily, if it's okay with them, since they're helping us.
Perfect.
Doug, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Doug Johnson. I work in the MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning, and I'm the project manager for the Silver Line Extension Alternatives Analysis, which I will be presenting on tonight.
Super.
Yep.
Thank you. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily DeMonico. I work in the Transit Analysis and Planning Group at CTPS, and we're staff to the Boston MPO, but we do a lot of transit work for the MBTA.
Great.
Sure.
Thank you. And Karen, we're going to come to you too. So at some point unmute. Len, why don't you go?
Okay. Leonard Diggins, and one of the co-chairs of the Capital Investment and Finance Subcommittee. Thank you.
Craig. Craig, are
Hi,
you there?
Yep, I'm here. Craig Leskowski, probably, and I think I'm co-chair of the Marketing Operations Subcommittee.
Thank you. Jacob.
Hi, I'm Jacob. I live in Arlington, Massachusetts, and I'm a member of ROC and several of the associated subcommittees.
Karen, are you speaking tonight? Did your phone come off mute? Okay, well, anyway, Karen, thank you for joining. It's nice to see you here. And we also have Barry here. And I guess we should introduce the co-chairs too. So Stefan, are you ready to introduce yourself? You're mute.
Thank you. I'm embarrassed. Yeah,
he's our tech guru.
Co-chair of the Rider Oversight Committee, also co-chair of the Marketing Operations Subcommittee, and running the tech show. We've got Barry able to communicate by chat, which I dragged into the shared screen. Oh, and just sorry, while I'm talking, Doug, since this might be a little weird to you that I'm sharing my screen that has all of us in it, It's actually deliberate so that all of our little family feud, the Brady Bunch squares show up on the YouTube stream, because it's a weird thing that YouTube doesn't get anybody unless they're talking and have a camera on. So people without cameras wouldn't even look like they were there. But anyway, Wade, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Wig Zamor. I'm for now helping Stefan a little bit as co-chair, member from Somerville. And I think at this point, we'll ask if there's any public comments, which would be Barry, if he's able to comment. And Barry, if you don't have a comment right now, we're happy to pick you up at the end too. And as Stefan said, he's monitoring chat. If you want to put anything in there, we're glad to see it there too. So I think without further ado, we'll move back to Doug, if that makes sense for everybody.
Oh yeah, and we are right on time. Actually, even a little early. How's that for a change?
Super.
All right, I will stop sharing the screen in case you want to share something, Doug. As I mentioned in my email to Doug, it's completely optional, and we can be free form depending on what you work, how you like to work with it, Doug.
I do have a presentation that I would be happy to go through.
Please do, yeah.
But we
Right
can
ahead.
keep it.
Oh, I got to now enable the screen sharing for
Yes, please.
you, and there you go.
But we can keep this pretty informal. Feel free to interrupt me at any point, ask questions. You don't have to wait till the end. The presentation probably has a level of detail that isn't necessary for this meeting. And it's also, all of this material is available on the project website as well. So if you want me to, skip over stuff, that's fine, or spend more time on certain sections, that's okay too.
Great.
Let me share that.
Looks good.
Excellent. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I am the project manager for the Silverline Extension Alternatives Analysis. Sorry, there we go. The slide deck that I have starts off with a project overview, a few slides about existing conditions, then the goals and objectives of the study, and the potential alignments that we've identified to move forward into analysis. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about next steps and where we're going to go from here. So project overview. What is the project and why are we doing it? Some of you may already be familiar with this. We've already had one public meeting and a couple stakeholder working group meetings. We've been underway for a couple months now. But the purpose of the Silverline Extension Alternatives Analysis is to assess the feasibility, utility, and cost of various alignment and service frequency options of an extension of the Silverline, providing high quality transit from Chelsea through Everett and on to Somerville, Cambridge, and or Boston. So long story short, we're looking at the SL3 in Chelsea, ways to potentially extend it into Everett, and other potential ways of improving transit service in the lower Mystic region, whether those be improvements to the Silverline or to other bus services that are out there. The project need, this is taken from Focus 40, the MBTA's long-term investment plan. And we sort of added on to it based on the findings that we found in our existing conditions analysis. But our main objective in this study is to look at adding transit service capacity and connectivity that will knit together Chelsea and Everett with nearby communities that are not currently well connected with high quality transit. The bullet points under this may all be information that's familiar to you, but I'll read through them. Existing transit service in Chelsea and Everett is not competitive with driving for many types of trips being made to and from Chelsea and Everett. But despite the lack of competitiveness, bus ridership in Chelsea and Everett during the pandemic has been more durable than in other communities. So the bus routes that serve Chelsea and Everett have actually retained a lot of their ridership relative to the system as a whole and relative to other bus routes. Chelsea, Everett, Somerville, and Cambridge all have areas that are experiencing rapid growth in housing and employment. And in many of those cases, those areas are not currently well served by transit. And then of course, as I just mentioned, there are existing transit connections in Chelsea and Everett, and to nearby communities that we believe could be leveraged and improved to make a more high quality, cohesive network. The map on the right-hand side of this slide is our study area. This was developed by looking at the studies that preceded this one, namely the Everett Transit Action Plan and the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group report, mapping all of the recommendations that those made, and then drawing a buffer around those recommendations to define the limits of our study area. And I should note that the bounds of the study area are strictly to define the potential alignments that we'll analyze. This does not bound our actual analysis. Things like ridership projections, are based on regional trip making, and developments outside of the study area are factored in to that analysis, or will be factored into the analysis. This study area is just to bound our potential alignments.
Len, go right ahead.
Oh, please.
Sorry about that. On your previous slide, the reason I know that there are stupid questions is because sometimes I get to ask them. And so the first two bullet points I know that's basic, but I'm not understanding what you're meaning by competitive, because when I kind of sum it up myself, then I'm not really clear on why the second statement isn't to be expected. So what do you mean by not competitive with driving?
Yeah, for the purposes of this study, competitiveness is defined as a similar travel time between being on a bus versus being in a car.
Okay.
So yeah, effectively, there is a lot of bus service in this area, but it does not get you from point A to point B nearly as quickly as being in a car often will.
Gotcha. Yeah, I knew it was something fundamental that I just didn't appreciate. So thank you very much.
Of course. All right, here's our project schedule, just broken up into seasons. You can see we're here in spring of 2021. The orange stars are our stakeholder working group meetings. That's a body that we have convened made up of representatives of different communities within our study area. And then the red stars are our planned public meetings for this process. So we just had our first public meeting at the end of April. You can find a recording of that public meeting on the project website. We've had 2 stakeholder working group meetings, and we're anticipating that our next stakeholder working group meeting, which is open to the public, I should mention, has been conducted on Zoom. They're also recorded and posted on the project website, just like a normal public information meeting would be. We anticipate the next stakeholder working group meeting and public meeting to take place at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. I'm hoping that we'll be able to, by then, have meetings in person, so we'll see. But I think right now the plan is to use Zoom unless otherwise directed. So that's our broad public engagement schedule, and that's obviously supplemented with a lot more direct outreach to folks within our study area. So we have developed our goals and objectives and are just refining those right now and finalizing those. We've done our existing conditions analysis. We have not completed our future no-build conditions analysis yet. That's basically looking at what our future year is 2040. So the no-build conditions are basically looking at what we think the region would look like and what travel patterns would look like in 2040 if we didn't do anything. And that provides a baseline for us to compare any proposals that we make. We are defining our alternatives right now. We're sort of finalizing up the alignments that we're planning to analyze, and then we'll get into, we have a 2-tier process, which I'll talk about more in a few slides, for actually analyzing the alternatives. That work will be getting underway very soon and will take place over the summer and into the fall. And then come winter 2021, 2022, we're hoping that our analysis will be complete and will be in a place where we can actually select a preferred alternative to recommend in our final report, which we're planning on finalizing and releasing in spring of 2022.
Doug, quick question for you.
Sure.
Because of the resiliency of so many of the routes in this study area, does that mean that there's less of a modeling of a new normal post-pandemic for these areas? At least, in other words, is the no build closer to what it would have been like from 2019 numbers, or is there a little bit of a shift based on the pandemic ridership response?
That's a great question, actually. We haven't finalized our methodology for the modeling effort for this yet. We're still working out exactly what assumptions we need to make in the future model based on what kind of infrastructure projects are in place, what planned work will have been completed by then, what proposed work needs to be included, and then what our assumptions about ridership will be. So it's possible, but we haven't finalized yet, but it's possible that we'll sort of extrapolate from 2019 and pre-COVID and then make adjustments post-modeling to reflect, what we're comfortable with having in our future model, but we haven't exactly finalized that methodology yet. So what we plan to do is when we have our next stakeholder working group meeting is present our proposed methodology for that effort to the stakeholder working group and get their input on it so that we can finalize that methodology and then conduct that work.
Then go ahead and then I'll ask another one.
Yeah,
Sure.
so just a quick question. Who's the we that's doing the modeling?
The modeling is actually being done by CTPS.
Okay.
So we have a contract with them to do ridership and air quality and environmental justice analysis.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
And then sort of a follow up to what I just asked a minute ago, also about is MassDOT are MassDOT projects for highway, non-MBTA, non-public transit projects also being incorporated somehow? I mean, because if I understand it right, a big reason for this project is because it's, as you said, it's public transit is not as competitive as driving. If MassDOT suddenly came out with some project plans that made driving even more attractive in the future, that would be kind of terrible for our public transit advocates and fans. Do you have any sense that MassDOT projects for roadway in this area are all captured and nothing's going to come out of left field?
So typically, the model is based on the long-range transportation plan and all of the projects that are included in that. So anything that will be in there is already represented in the model. We'll just make sure that there isn't anything that was recently built as part of like the rapid response program, like any of the bus lanes that were implemented recently. We'll make sure that any of that stuff gets incorporated into the model if it wasn't already represented. So we'll try to make sure it's as up to date as it possibly can be, but any projects that are in LRTP should already be represented in the model. So
excellent. That. Fantastic. Thank you.
And I can tell by Emily nodding her head that I accurately represented that. I will say that modeling.
Without speaking for the modelers, that is my understanding of what's going on.
I also should caveat that I am not a modeler and that I would, if I had staff from CTPS here who do modeling, I would defer to them for that question, but I believe that what I told you is an accurate representation of that process.
Excellent.
Yes. All right, moving on. So existing conditions, I just have 5 existing conditions slides. We kept this section really short. We did a pretty extensive existing conditions analysis and actually have a pretty lengthy slide deck that covers existing conditions on the project website. We presented it at the, I believe, the first stakeholder working group meeting. So if you want to know more about the project area, how transit currently performs in that area, and demographics, stuff like that. You can go find that longer presentation on the project website. This is just a high-level summary of our findings from that process. So first, we do an existing conditions analysis for a lot of different reasons. We want to make sure we understand how the system is used today, and understand what the issues are that are out there, so that we can tell if any of our recommendations would actually be an improvement over the existing conditions or not, or address any of the issues that exist in the study area. It also, sets the context of, for our work, and how it relates to the other work that's happening in the study area. And like I said, it creates that baseline that we can actually use to analyze or evaluate any of our alternatives. So we have 5 key takeaways, and I have a slide that relates to each one of these, so I won't read them all out loud on this slide. But the first is that Everett and Chelsea have the demand and demographics to support high frequency, high capacity transit service. So you can see this map on the right is a composite density map. It's showing number of residents and jobs together per acre. So the areas in the darkest color, that brown, maroonish color, have more than 45 people or jobs, or a combination of, per acre. And you can see that areas like Union Square, Kendall Square, Gilman Square in Somerville are all very high density areas, but so are the areas along Broadway and Everett. Hopefully, can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yep.
Yeah, yes.
It's showing up.
So Broadway and Everett, downtown Chelsea as well. These are also very dense areas. They have the density and the population characteristics, which I'll talk about on the next slide, that suggest that high frequency, high quality transit service would be utilized and have the ridership to support it. So speaking to demographics, our study area has more transit critical residents than the inner core overall. It does vary a lot across the study area, as there isn't a uniformity of urban form. It's a large study area that encompasses 5 different municipalities. So that's why there's so much variation. But for this project, and similar to the Forging Ahead initiative at the T, transit critical is defined as low-income households, households of color, and households with low or zero personal vehicles. And low is defined as less cars than people in a household. So those 3 characteristics make up what is referred to as transit critical populations. These are folks who are more likely to rely on public transit because of those factors. So there is a lot of variability, but transit critical populations are concentrated in the parts of Chelsea and Everett that our study area covers. And then Everett residents have less access to regional activity centers than residents in adjacent communities, and that's mostly a result of the way the transit network is currently operating or designed. So this map on the left is travel time from Everett Square during the morning peak period. And this is all pre-COVID. This is, I believe, winter 2020, pre-COVID conditions. You can see that if you're traveling on public transit from Everett Square, you can make it to a lot of places within 30 minutes, but you can't make it to Kendall Square within 30 minutes. And you can't make it to downtown Boston within 30 minutes either. Mostly that being a function of the fact that you would have to take a bus down Broadway and then transfer at Sullivan Square. So despite being geographically really close to those places on public transit, it can take a while to access those regional job centers. And that's, as I mentioned, sort of a function of the way the transit network is currently operating and the number of transfers that you have to make. So the map on the right is showing where you can get to direct access. So that's, from the first transit service that you board, a single transfer. So you're transferring to a second service, or multiple transfers. You're transferring to a third or fourth service. And you can see that gap over between, Leechmere and Kendall. So in order to get to Kendall from Everett Square, you can take a bus to Sullivan Square, and then you can transfer to the CT2 to get to Kendall. So that's how you can get there in a single transfer. But you could also take the orange line to the red line. The downside with that is that it adds another transfer. So the timing of that could either work out really well or end up making your trip take longer.
Doug, I just got to give you kudos, or you and the team. These two visualizations are some of the best I've seen in a long time coming out of MassDOT MBTA. I mean, these are just really, really compelling visualizations. So just great job on these.
Thank you. I have to give all credit to the consultant team that is helping with this project. They have done a great job with the visuals. And then finding number 4 was that the existing transit network constraints and congestion play a role in that lack of access. So going back to the transit travel time, this is going to vary based on traffic conditions and other factors. But this map here on the right shows daily passenger minutes of delay, weekdays from winter 2020, so before COVID. And so this is a function of both how long a bus will be stuck in traffic, but also the number of passengers on it. So if a route has more passengers, then there's more passenger minutes of delay. That's a measure of how much time is essentially being lost to delay. So it's not normalized by ridership, but you can still get a sense of where new things like bus lanes or improvements to service or transit signal priority could make a huge difference for a lot of passengers and reduce, have the most impact in reducing delay. And you can see that, to me at least, the Broadway corridor really stands out here, as well as the area around Sullivan Square. And then North Washington Street Bridge, but of course, the North Washington Street Bridge, is being reconstructed, and we'll have a southbound bus lane, which will help improve travel time for folks on the 111 and the other buses that go over that bridge. And then the last finding is that the Silver Line extension or other transit priority investments could potentially help address the gap in transit travel time, access to jobs, all the things that I mentioned. And this map on the right is fairly complicated to understand. There's this legend or graphic will help you understand what's being shown here. So essentially, there's a scale here of how easy it is to get places on transit, sort of relative to driving. And then the other scale is just how easy it is to get to jobs, by driving. So areas that are in this dark purple color represent the fact that from there, you can access a lot of jobs within 45 minutes by either driving or by transit. Areas on this green scale are, you can get to a lot of jobs by public transportation pretty easily. So you see that here around the orange line, which makes sense. This red scale shows areas where you can get to a lot of jobs by driving. So, along 93 makes sense. But what really stands out here is that in large sections of Everett, you're really limited in the number of jobs you can get to within 45 minutes by driving or by public transportation. So there's a huge gap here in access to jobs, whether you're driving or taking public transportation. And then we also, on the left-hand side here, you can see how Glendale Square, which is approximately here on Broadway and Everett, how it compares in number of jobs you can access by transit or by car compared to Maverick Square, Davis Square, and Malden Center, which are all places that have rapid transit stops. Yes, Len.
So And so that's controlling for population. I mean, so in those like areas that are white, I mean, is it controlling for population and jobs? I mean, so essentially, I'm asking like, are there jobs in those areas that are white?
There are jobs in those areas, but this is actually, so there's a commercial corridor along Broadway, but then off of Broadway on Ferry Street, there's also commercial enterprises, but besides Broadway and Ferry Street, it's actually predominantly residential around there.
Okay.
But this isn't a reflection of population. It's strictly from these areas. What is the number of jobs you can get to within 45 minutes?
Yeah, I got you. And I guess what? Okay, all right. You know, because I mean, I was like wondering. I'm moving my mouse, but you can't see where it is. I mean, so, for instance, the green area, I mean, that is to the north and the top and left of it, and where we're showing a lot of high ability to get there by transit.
Yep.
I mean,
yeah.
Do you think? Yeah, yeah. So, do you think that most of the people who are going to those jobs there live in that area, or do you think they're coming from elsewhere?
Oh, so this is neither a reflection of where people live or where people work. It's simply, if you are starting in that location, can you get to a lot of jobs within 45 minutes or not? So if you're starting around these orange line stops, you have a lot of access by transit by virtue of getting on the orange line.
Gotcha. Well,
you're not necessarily going to that area.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for explaining that.
Of course. Yeah. Honestly, this is the most complicated map I have to present before. And when the consultant team first put this together, I had a lot of trouble wrapping my head around it.
That's a good one. No, I like it. I mean, I do like it. I mean, and I was on the wrong track with it. So thank you. And just quickly while you're, so who is the consultant?
The consultant team is led by the firm Nelson Nygaard.
Oh yeah, all right.
And yep, they have a few sub-consultants, including Nick Mann, which is doing a lot of the engineering analysis for us, and then a few other sub-consultants as well.
Yeah, familiar with them. No, this is great. I mean, because I didn't understand it doesn't mean it's not good. In fact, it makes me even more impressed by it. Thank you.
No problem.
Doug, before we go to this next section, I just want to make sure that we give a chance to Craig, Carl, who joined a little bit late. Great to have you, Carl, and Karen. Anyone want to ask any other questions? I would just want to make sure that particularly folks who are on the phone only, or Barry, type something. Please feel free.
Yeah, I'll jump in quickly, and if you want to hold this off till later in the presentation. Would you characterize, is the goal of this to say whether or not the extension of the Silver Line is a good idea, or is the goal to say what is the best way to provide additional public transportation to this area? And so I guess I'm asking in a funny way, are you limited in this study to basically saying thumbs up, thumbs down on Silver Line, or could you, for example, say, Silver Line would be good, but man, extending the Orange Line or there's something really, over the top would be great. I'm just trying to get a sense of how much freedom you have beyond just simply asking the black or white question, more Silver Line good, more Silver Line bad.
Sure. So I think the way that I would describe this is it's asking the question, what are the existing limitations within the study area? Is there a way that extending the Silver Line could address that? And what other improvements to bus service could also help achieve those goals? So we are not looking beyond various forms of bus service. So we're not looking at things like a potential Orange Line. This is more focused on the Silver Line, but we're anticipating that there are going to be recommendations that come out of this that could be made to improve bus service in general and isn't necessarily going to be limited just to the Silver Line. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, you were spot on, and thanks for dealing with my muddled question. And I guess I can see pros and cons of the approach. From a pro, I mean, I think it keeps you nice and focused. You're not trying to solve the world here. You have a very specific scope in terms of which I think should lead to better recommendations specific to bus. So I see that as a really good thing. If there's a con to it, to a certain degree, I see it as it feels like to a certain degree that the solution is preordained, because we're saying it's a study to in a way justify the expansion of the Silver Line. So it's you can understand my disappointment that that it leaves other options off the table, and kind of has a preordained direction of where it's going.
I understand. Yeah. So I'll get into that a little bit about why we are doing this in the way that we're doing it in the next couple slides, if you will bear with me as I get to it.
Sounds good.
Quick thing just to mention it, Barry, I put the link to the live YouTube stream in the Zoom chat. It looked like you were having some trouble with your Zoom connection. So Barry, if you want to just drop out of Zoom completely, you can watch live YouTube and send in chat questions there too. Go ahead, Doug. Sorry for that pause there.
Oh, no problem at all. All right, so the next section is about the goals and objectives and how we formulated them. It includes, I think, more detail than will be necessary to go through on this call, but this information will be available for you to review and make comments on if you'd like later. But I want to start with the context and the history that led up to this project, and I think that will sort of get to why we're looking specifically at the Silver Line and the ways that other bus services in this area could be improved. So back in 2012, MassDOT launched a Silver Line Gateway study to look at extending Silver Line service from the seaport in East Boston into Chelsea. That study identified the Newbury-Rockport rail right-of-way as the preferred alignment for a busway and new Silver Line service. Construction of that began in 2015. Then in 2016, MassDOT and the City of Everett partnered to create the Everett Transit Action Plan. That plan actually recommended extending the SL3 from Chelsea into Everett and then up into Malden Center by way of Broadway and Ferry Street. And then one of the biggest things that came out of the Everett Transit Action Plan was piloting the inbound bus lane on Broadway in Everett. So that pilot was done at the end of 2016, and then it was made permanent in 2017 and was really, I think, the first bus lane in the region. It sort of kicked off this bus lane striping boom that we're experiencing now. And then in 2017, the City of Boston released Go Boston 2030. And I mentioned that because in the subsequent years after the SL3 construction began in Chelsea, each of the municipalities in our study area released their own transportation plan or municipal comprehensive plan or other plan that formulated the community's goals and objectives that we actually drew from to create our goals and objectives for this study, so that this study would be consistent with the visions that were laid out by all of the municipalities that are in our study area. So then in 2018, the SL3 to Chelsea busway was complete and service began. 2019, this MBTA released Focused 40, which included a recommendation to study extending Silver Line from Chelsea into Everett. At this, around the same time, the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group released their report on how to address traffic congestion in the Lower Mystic area. And that report actually recommended creating two new services, two new Silver Line or like services in addition to other recommendations. And what they recommended was having one service go from the terminal of the SL3 in Chelsea into Everett and then on to Sullivan Square and Kendall Square, and another service come down Broadway in Everett, go down Rutherford and connect into North Station. So they identified the need for better connections to Kendall Square and downtown for folks in Chelsea and Everett. And that study and the recommendation from Focus 40 really spurred the creation of this study and our effort to take a look at how Silver Line could actually be extended if it were to be. The recommendation in the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group report included those services, but they also recommend, they asked MassDOT to take a closer look at how that would actually be implemented. So the main focus of this study is to answer that question and figure out if we were to do something with the Silver Line, what exactly would it be? That's why this is an alternatives analysis where we're looking at all of the different alternatives, comparing them against each other and figuring out, what would be the best course of action. Yes, thank you for dropping the link to that report in the chat.
So just to play that back and kind of, I guess, to follow up to my line of question before, but essentially, going back, at least to the Everett plan in 2015, but even a little bit before that, but basically for the last 5 or 6 years, there have been numerous, whether you call it studies or efforts to say, hey, we need more, be it Silver Line or some kind of dedicated bus. So in a way, it's those studies in those efforts that kind of spurred this, and that's why you're kind of sent in the direction you were, is because they asked for it. They didn't ask for. Look, they made recommendations saying we want more Silver Line. So this is the natural pivot or next step to then say, okay, how could we implement that? It's nice to say you want more Silver Line, but what is a realistic option that could serve the most ridership and deliver that ridership to job centers?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And then a few other milestones that preceded this one after 2019 were just City of Cambridge and City of Somerville both released their comprehensive plans, and then bus lanes were implemented in Sweetser Circle, on Broadway outbound in Everett, and on Main Street in Everett as well. So in the past couple of years, there have been several more bus lanes implemented. And I mention all of that because the different alternatives that we are going to look at will include varying levels of transit accommodations. In some cases, it will be, all-day bus lanes. In other cases, it might be peak hour bus lanes. It will depend on the circumstances of each of the alignments that we look at and how much space is available in the right-of-way or could be available in the future. So then we launched the study at the end of 2020. And we've been at it for a few months, and we expect it to wrap up at the beginning of 2022. So I don't think I need to tell you why goals and objectives are important, as it says on this slide, or where we drew our inspiration from, because I just went over that. We have grouped our goals and objectives, or excuse me, our objectives into 4 goal areas. So the goals are general statements of value, you could say. The objectives are more specific, and then for each objective, we actually have a quantifiable and measurable metric associated with it that will allow us to actually measure how well we're doing all of these things that we say we're going to do. So the goal areas are expand mobility and access, advance equity, improve safety, and support climate change, resilience, and sustainability. And I actually should skip one sec. I should go to this slide. So our evaluation framework, I think talking about the goals and metrics will make more sense if I talk about the overall evaluation framework first. So basically the idea is to look at all of the potential routes that a service could take from the terminal of the SL3 in Chelsea to Kendall or to downtown or points along Broadway and Everett and places in between. Look at all of the potential routes, evaluate those segments against our purpose and need to see if they, get at our purpose and our need, and screen out the ones that don't, or that we think would not be feasible from an engineering perspective, or not be permittable by environmental agencies, or would be difficult, like exceedingly difficult to permit. Screen out those alignments, and then take all the ones that are remaining and analyze them section by section to see, what are the characteristics of the walk sheds of those alignments, like how many people would live within walking distance of it, how many transit critical riders would live within walking distance of it, all questions like that. And then we'll evaluate all of those alignments. That process is going to create a matrix, or essentially a spreadsheet. And on one axis, you'll have each of the alignments, and on the other axis, you have each of these metrics that we're evaluating it on. And we'll be able to compare all of them against each other and see which ones perform the best in terms of, providing access to the highest number of people. Some of our metrics are like access to the highest number of affordable housing, things like that. I'll show you that list in a second. But we'll evaluate all of the alignments against each other, take the ones that score the best, and then piece them together into full routes. And those full routes will have service plans for, we'll do ridership modeling and air quality modeling for, and then we will evaluate those full routes against each other, and from those select a preferred alternative, which could potentially end up being, some kind of amalgamation of the best sections of those routes. Wig, it looks like you have a question.
I do have questions, but I'm trying to hold off. I think this is a really important topic, and I'm hoping we'll have time. How many more slides do you have?
Let's see. So we can go really quickly through the goals and objectives, and then I have 4 slides that show alignments that I think would be important to take a look at. So I can try to breeze.
Okay.
Yeah, fly through those.
Doug, do you have a hard stop cutoff time for the rest of your evening with your family, real world?
As long as my dog seems to be asleep right now, and as long as she continues to be asleep, I think we're in good shape. I'm afraid that at any minute she's going to wake up and start barking at me to pay attention to her, but I think we're in the clear.
We'll tell you what. Let's go another 20 minutes till 6:15. We have some flexibility in the agenda, and then let's see where we are at 6:15.
Sounds good.
Oh, yeah, so, Jacob, go ahead.
Oh, please.
I guess I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question. So, where are you starting? Are you guys at CTPS and MassDOT? Are they? I guess maybe that you wouldn't be the right person to ask because you're not directly involved in the planning and the modeling for this. So I think I'll ask a modeler.
Okay. If your question is about general like process or timeline, I can say that the modeling effort, it takes place under this tier 2 evaluation, and we expect that work to get underway in August.
So do you know where the modelers are on this sort of timeline now?
They are basically waiting for us to package our alternatives together and hand them off to them so that they can then go and model them.
So sort of right now we're between tier 1 evaluation and tier 2 evaluation?
Yeah, our project team is right at the start of tier 1. We're just getting that analysis underway, and we expect it to take place over June and July. We'll have it finalized at the end of July. We'll be able to package our alternatives together then and hand that off to CTPS to do their modeling.
I guess the question I do have for you is sort of is there a bottleneck in what is the limiting factor that dictates how quickly MassDOT or another organization could get some recommendations from CTPS and get them turned around and back out the door to CTPS? Like, what's the limiting factor on as to how fast you can complete these studies?
Great question. So I think it varies from study to study based on the amount of work that is necessary. We expected that the total timeline of this project would take about 18 months, which I think is pretty reasonable amount of time. You can sometimes do studies like this in less time than that. It really depends on the scope of work. This, our study area is pretty big, so 18 months, we thought that that was a good enough time to give ourselves to be comfortable with like staffing levels, stuff like that, to get this done. I will say probably the thing that really can't be rushed is the public process. Like, there needs to be a robust public process for any kind of planning study that you do. And you need to have, public meetings and public outreach throughout the process. You can't really do this work absent of the public process. So even if we could, rush certain internal processes, we would still need to, schedule public meetings, do enough outreach for them, have enough coordination with our municipal partners and the folks on our stakeholder working group, and give them time to review the information that we make available. So you can't make, I'd say there's a point where you can't speed up the process more, but I think 18 months as a total timeline is pretty reasonable for an effort like this. I can't speak exactly to CTPS, but I would assume with any agency or private company that normal limitations are just the amount of staff that you have on hand to actually conduct the work, and the amount of other work you have to get done in the same kind of timeline. So theoretically, if you had a limited number of people to do the work, you could do it very, very quickly. But obviously there's staffing constraints and other priorities like other studies that happen.
So if you at MassDOT, I guess the question is our staffing levels right now at MassDOT a larger bottleneck than the public process things that you were talking about? Like, if you had 5 or 6 more people, could you get the project done faster?
I think, well, so most of the analysis is being done by a consultant team. Certainly things could happen slightly faster, but I don't think considerably faster than they're currently happening. But in general, I don't think that that's our limitation, to directly answer your question. Staffing is not what is dictating the overall timeline of this process.
Okay. This is the last part of the question, I swear. What is the limitation? Is it the public process stuff you talked about earlier?
That certainly is one. I guess I don't really see their, sorry, my dog is awake now, and very upset. 1 second. I don't think that they're, sorry.
It's all right.
No problem.
I'm sure you can all hear that, yeah. I don't think that there is any limitation necessarily. I think we're moving at a reasonable and fairly normal speed for work like this. But you're free to disagree if you think that efforts like this should be done more quickly.
I mean, I guess the question is, this is a purely theoretical question. If, I don't know, the governor or the legislature, forget who, if you had to get this project done, start to finish, in 12 months instead of 18, what would have to change in the process in order to make that happen?
Okay, that's a good question. I guess speaking entirely hypothetically, you could, if you had a process that was going to take a certain amount of time and you wanted to do it in less time than that, you could increase the budget in such a way that the consultant team would be able to hire more staff to do the analysis faster. There's still a certain amount of time that any kind of public process is going to take. You know, if you're doing direct outreach to folks in the community, you have to get people out into the community with, you know, materials about the project. You have to figure out who you need to talk to, what kind of connections in the neighborhoods you need to make in order to make sure that information is being disseminated. You probably need to translate your materials into different languages. There's timelines for public meetings that require a lot of lead time. For instance, if you're going to hold a public meeting, you have to advertise it a certain amount of time ahead. By law, you can't just, you know, say like, hey, we're having a meeting tomorrow. You have to give sufficient notice for that meeting to happen. The timelines vary from place to place, but it's typically, you know, 2 or 3 weeks notice. Usually you have to advertise those meetings in different newspapers, make sure that you're publishing it on the agency website and in other locations, and doing, you know, other direct outreach. So yeah, and hypothetically, you can always do some of that work faster by just throwing more money and more people at it. But at a certain point, you can't do things any faster because of, you know, a lot of those factors. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna continue. We'll go to goals and objectives. So we have 20 different objectives and a metric for each one. And I won't go through every single one, but I'll give you sort of a high-level overview of how all these work. So under our goal area of expand mobility and access, our first objective is connect residents directly with jobs, services, and other daily activities. And the way that we're going to measure that is the total employment, either existing or what's included in the 2040 CTPS model. So what is expected or planned within a half-mile walk of any of our alignments. Some of these metrics will be evaluated on a segment by segment level. And when I start to show you the maps at the end of this, I think you'll get a better understanding of what I mean by segment. We can, you know, analyze individual pieces of any route, but there are certain metrics that can only be determined by creating a service plan for a whole route. So things like providing transit competitive with driving for trips within and to and from the study area. In order to measure whether we're doing that or not, we would have to create a service plan. So that will be measured at the tier 2 level once we're actually looking at the different full alternatives. So as I was mentioning earlier, this stage of the analysis, tier 1, the results of this analysis will produce a spreadsheet or a matrix where you can see how each alignment performs on each of these metrics. We'll take the ones that perform the best or you know, on various metrics or make the most sense to link together, and we'll put those together into those full routes. So sort of at a high level, the way the objectives are written is essentially we ask sort of at a really high level, or to describe it at a high level, we ask, you know, how would this perform for everyone in our study area? And then specifically, how would this perform for transit critical populations in our study area? Like, would this serve their needs and provide access to them? And then under improved safety, this is where, you know, we want to ask in any of our alignments, can we provide a comfortable and safe pedestrian access to and from where a station would be located? Is there enough room in the right of way to ensure that we have ADA compliant accommodations? Can we provide comfortable bicycle facilities either within those alignments or on a parallel corridor that we think is reasonable? An example I bring that up specifically because, as you may know, with the Silver Line Gateway project, the SL3 in Chelsea, there is a dedicated busway along the Newbury Rockport Commuter Rail right of way, and then parallel to that is a bike path or a shared use path on the Chelsea Greenway. And that, is a parallel corridor that provides a comfortable and safe access for people biking, and partly because people on bikes would not be or cannot use the busway. There may be instances in which we feel that a shared bus bike lane would provide a reasonably comfortable enough accommodation that would be okay, but there may be other segments that we think the service frequency or the speed of buses would be too high to allow for sharing with bus and bikes. And then under supporting climate change resilience and sustainability, this is mostly tier 2. This is looking at what the potential transit mode share would be for any of these alternatives or impact on mode share in our study area, and then what the greenhouse gas emissions would be projected to be within our study area from trips, and that will come out of CTPS's analysis. And then the third point, avoiding climate change vulnerabilities. There are areas within our study area that have been identified as being susceptible to flooding in future conditions based on projections for sea level rise. So we want to make sure that our alignments would avoid those impacts if possible, or we'd be able to mitigate those impacts. And then the objectives are all the same. They're all for tier 1 and tier 2. It's just the metrics that change based on whether we're analyzing individual segments or full routes. So for actual alignments, we've broken up our study area into 4 sections. Section 1 is Chelsea and Everett. Section 2 is Broadway and Everett, or to put it more broadly, Everett to the Orange Line. Section 3 is the Orange Line to Kendall, whether from Wellington or Sullivan. And Section 4 is the Orange Line to Boston. But there is also this piece from Lechmere into downtown Boston. Essentially, if you have a route that has made it over into Lechmere, theoretically, you could continue into downtown. But of course, as we go through our analysis, we'll see if in any of our alternatives, it would make sense to include that or not, because you will have the Green Line connection there. So that's our evaluation framework again. So we're at the start of this tier 1 process. We've identified the different alignments, and we are going to be analyzing them. And here they are broken up by section. So this is section 1. This is the terminal of the SL3 in Chelsea, where this green dot is, to Broadway in Everett. And the solid line here is what was recommended by the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group report. And the dotted lines are other routes that we have identified for consideration. So the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group report recommended going along the commuter rail right of way up 2nd Street and then onto Route 16. And then they had proposed a separate service coming down Broadway in Everett. They had it coming from Glendale Square, which is here, but we recognize that if there is a service that we'll analyze that originates on Broadway and goes up and down Broadway, it would need a place to turn around. And this park up here, there's a triangular park and roads that form a triangle around it. Seems like a natural place to have a service turn around if there is to be a service that's just serving that corridor, and then beyond from there. So other options for connecting over to Broadway and Everett, you can go up Everett Ave to Route 16. You could just continue right up 2nd Street if you're already on it, or you could divert off 2nd Street up Spring Street to Chelsea Street, or potentially continue along the commuter rail right of way into Sweetser Circle. So we are looking at all of those. We're also looking at the width of the state or city owned right of way for any of these segments to see what could actually fit within that space. And of course, we're talking to our municipal partners about, whether the existing right of way should be considered a limitation or not, or whether there are opportunities to overcome limitations in the right of way. Carl said he's not seeing screen share. Can you all still see what I'm sharing?
I can see it. This is Wig.
Wig, you can see it, and Stefan said yes. Interesting, Carl. I'm not sure why you're not able to see it.
They try rejoining it.
Doug, can you go forward one and back one? Just make sure we're seeing it move. Yep. Section 1. I saw section 2 for a minute. Now we're back in section 1. Yep, looks good.
Yeah. Yeah, Carl. Perhaps if you leave and rejoin.
Looks like he dropped off. He's probably going to reconnect.
Sounds good. All right, so we'll move on to section 2. So this is ever to the orange line. The Lower Mystic Regional Working Group report recommended using Lower Broadway and getting into Sullivan Square. You could also potentially, if you were going along the commuter rail right of way from section 1 along here, you potentially continue along the commuter rail right of way to the back of the casino. Or if you want to connect to Wellington rather than Sullivan, if you're coming down Broadway, you could get onto Route 16, or if you're already on Route 16, you could continue on Route 16 to get into Wellington. There is one route on here that we have marked in gray, and we have a note that says concerns about feasibility. This would be just continuing along the commuter right of way, and you would need a new bridge on this stretch over the Mystic, and then connecting down into Sullivan Square from there. But we have a lot of concerns about the engineering feasibility of doing something like that and the way that it would interact with the existing commuter rail and Orange Line tracks. And we also have concerns about the ability to permit something like that, because typically in the permitting process, environmental permitting, if there is a less impactful alternative, then it's really difficult to get approval for the alternative that has the significant environmental impact. So it is, we believe it'd be really difficult to get a permit for something like that when you could potentially use the Alfred Street Bridge. So that's something
Jacob,
that just confirming, please.
I guess the question is, have you gotten far enough along in the study? Would one of the advantages of going along the rail bridge might be time saving, right?
Potentially. We're looking at what kind of transit accommodations we could fit onto Lower Broadway and the Alfred Street Bridge. So theoretically, if we have continuous bus lanes along that stretch, then there wouldn't really be much time savings for a bridge over the Mystic. I guess, the one thing with going along Lower Broadway is there are still intersections that you potentially have to stop at. But those could theoretically be, the delay from those could be mitigated by transit signal priority. The other downside with doing the back of the casino and then new bridge over the Mystic is that it would be really difficult to site any stations. So it might be slightly faster, but it would probably serve a lot less people, because you wouldn't be able to have stations, you wouldn't have a station on the bridge. You'd have to figure out where that would be located, and a station on the between the casino and Gateway Center, I'm assuming would yield much lower ridership than a station that's actually on Lower Broadway where there's significant housing.
Carl's asking, could you just go back to the section 1 just so we can see the map again?
Oh, sure.
He's able to see the screen share now.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. So Carl, this is section 1. Solid line is Lower Mystic Working Group recommendation.
Got it.
Dash
Thanks.
line is us. Yep.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So that was section 2. Section 3, the orange line to Kendall. So this is where it starts to really open up in terms of what the options are. So the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group report recommended going along Washington Street and down Interbelt Road and over what would need to be a new bridge over the commuter rail tracks to get into North Point, and then to Leechmere, and then down First Street, Binney, and 3rd Street into Kendall. So that was the route they proposed. We are taking a look at that and the feasibility of constructing a bridge from Intervelt Road into North Point. That idea has been recommended by several studies in the past, but the conditions in that area have significantly changed due to the extension of the Green Line. So we, based on the Green Line extension plans, which we are looking at the feasibility of building a bridge through there and what exactly it would take to put a bridge through there. Other options include going down Washington Street to Route 28, or McGrath, I should say, into Leechmere. Of course, if you connected to Wellington from Section 2, theoretically, you could continue from Wellington on down the Fellsway and all the way down 28 to Leechmere. We have a route here in gray that routes through Assembly. That is a route that had been recommended in a fairly old plan at this point, the old urban ring study. And we don't think that that alignment really serves the purpose and need of this study, because if you are a Chelsea or Everett resident and you are trying to connect to Kendall Square, this route just duplicates the Orange Line service and doesn't actually achieve the goal of providing a direct connection for you to, downtown or Kendall. Other options on here are, you can potentially go to Rutherford and Gilmore to First Street or tying to Leechmere. And then the other route on here that's in gray is the Grand Junction right of way. We believe that that will be screened out because the space within that right of way is being explored as a multi-use path along the existing rail tracks, and there would not be enough room in addition to those to have a busway through there. And then the exact circulation in Kendall Square is to be determined. We're taking a look. And then Section 4, this is a little more simple. If you're trying to connect into downtown from Sullivan, you can do Rutherford Ave to North Washington Street. And if you had made it over to Leechmere and you want to connect into downtown, you do the Museum of Science Bridge. But similarly to Kendall Square, the circulation and terminals in downtown are to be determined. We're sort of figuring that out now as we're at the beginning of our Tier 1 analysis to see what would make sense through there and what should be included in our analysis. And then this is basically the end of the presentation. Our next steps are to finalize our goals, objectives, and metrics. We're just wrapping up, refining those so that we can start that analysis. And we will then complete our screening process and do the Tier 1 evaluation, and then have our next public meeting at the end of the summer or beginning of fall of this year. And that's it. If you have any questions, obviously I'm here to answer them, but you can also submit questions to our project email address, slx@mbta.com. If you go to mbta.com/slx, you'll see our past presentations, all the information about this study, and the recordings of those past meetings that we held.
Jacob, please.
Oh, sorry. Looks like someone else wanted to go first. Wait.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've got some questions piled up, if it's okay with folks. And Stefan, I think this is a pretty important project. I hope we can just continue the time relaxation.
Oh yeah, I agree. I'm glad that people are as interested in this as I am.
Okay, so the first thing, and some of these, if there are short answers to some of these, I'd really appreciate it. The first thing is the technology. Are these electrified buses, and if so, how?
Great question. We are working with the Bus Modernization Program Office at the MBTA to figure out what exactly our assumptions should be for the future condition. We haven't exactly figured out what the assumption will be for what kind of buses are available for those alternatives.
Okay, I just will say as comment and not a question that, I appreciate the T has been working with battery-based buses, but the weight penalty so far has been huge. So you can't really say they're sustainable at this point. Who has done there's a huge number of opportunity zones on the lower Mystic. Who's done the employment analysis for that, and what shift in employment have they produced out of that?
Great question. So one of our sub-consultants, RKG, has been looking at the land use projections for us and working with MAPC and CTPS. So the CTPS model is updated based on what's in the MassWorks database, which is maintained by MAPC. So our consultant team has been coordinating with Tim Reardon at MAPC.
Yeah, Tim is terrific. I'd be really interested, not to know from you, but I guess in the future, the extent to which they're presuming a shift to research-based jobs, especially given the acreage and especially given the fact that the lower Mystic and north of Mystic communities are really left out at this point. So that would be important to me. In your EJ analysis, I saw that some of it's being done at tract level, and I'm wondering if you're using block group or tract.
That's a great question. I would have to check with CTPS.
Okay, that's okay. I would just comment that the really heavy primary emissions and health effects near large sources like highways, you can't really get at that if you're using tracts. You really got to get to the smallest unit that also has SES, which would be block groups. And of course, they have to convert to and from TAZs, but between Tim and CTPS, I'm not really worried about that. I have a lot of confidence in their abilities. I just lost, sorry, I just lost the screen. I got it back. In your EJ analysis, do you look at the number of rapid transit stations in each of the communities as a core base of that?
That is another good question for CTPS. I mean, we're looking at general transit services within our study area.
I just would comment that I don't consider bus of any type to be equal to a rapid transit station. And it's clear that there's a massive skew in where the rapid transit stations are. And with the exception of the Orange Line, they're not in this area. One Blue Line station gets into Revere, but it's just a massive, massive area. And I would just comment an interesting fact that I didn't anticipate when MGB did their analysis for the headquarters and computer and finance and phone functions, which they handle at Assembly Square for the whole group. The Orange Line was their key transit line. I was surprised by that. I expected that the Red Line might be, given its prominence with the research universities. But they already had, by that decision point, noticed that the data was really, their population was really based on the Orange Line. And that speaks to the cluster that you got the question about in Malden. I think people may not realize the extent to which people who are not super highly paid but are educated and part of the research economy discovered that on their own and used that Orange Line function up to Malden quite efficiently, which is terrific. I mean, good for Malden, and I appreciate it. Do you have back of the envelope? I know your key analyses will be done later, but do you have back of the envelope on daily ridership we're looking at here?
No.
Okay, so I want to make one other comment, and then I'll come back to that, and then I'll stop because other people probably ask questions. It's not a complaint about you, but it drives me crazy that people use greenhouse gases when black carbon is 3,000 times as potent as CO2, and transportation emits a ton. Well, I won't say a ton. Emits an awful large percentage of the total black carbon in the United States, including in Massachusetts. And to speak about greenhouse gases and to let that allow you to mathematically not count black carbon is really bad math, climate math. That's not on you. I just wanted to bring that up because you've got greenhouse gases, which is the term of art most people use, but the climate scientists all use climate pollutant as the term of art, not greenhouse gases. It's mostly people inside professions or in politics who use greenhouse gases at this stage, but there are no scientists who use that, climate scientists. So the thing that I keep going back to, and people will anticipate this comment, phase 3 of the old urban ring project, which has kind of been severed from these discussions since well before you, in the bus transit project you're piggybacking on, the urban ring phase 3 was already severed. But that was predicted to carry 300,000 direct trips a day and to free up 150,000 trips of capacity in the other rapid transit parts of the system. So the total daily impact was 450,000 trips per day, basically equal to or exceeding any 2 rapid transit lines that already exist in our system. And if you consider that, like the orange line, that service might last 40 years, you're talking over 5 billion trips that are electrified, 450,000 a day. I just cannot personally accept that these rapid transit bus-based systems are going to come close to that. And I think that failure and the failure to integrate with Harvard Alston and Longwood Well is going to continue to leave out these lower Mystic and north of Mystic communities from our research economy.
Thanks for sharing. Thank you for sharing all of that. I appreciate it.
Are you advocating in a way for a full urban ring?
Yeah, absolutely. Me?
I mean, if I'm reading the subtext here, it's like these piecemeal extensions of the Silver Line is not going to get us there. You're really advocating for a full urban ring?
Absolutely. If you want to integrate our rapid transit system and you want to include the lower Mystic and north of Mystic communities, which is where an awful lot of the environmental justice population lives now, you've got to give them equal service. This is not on Doug or anybody else working on these projects. So, I apologize to you guys personally, and hope you're not taking this as any complaint about the execution of the projects. I don't have any complaint about that, but I have a big complaint about the level of inequality that's going to continue here across the region, and the lack of sustainability compared to electrified rapid transit.
I had promised we would do a time check at 6:15, and I completely blew it, and it's just ticked over to 6:30. I suggest, how about we do another 5 minutes, and then we'll let Doug go, because Doug, you've been really generous with your time. Thank you so much.
No problem at all.
Jacob, please.
So this is sort of piggybacking off of Wig's comments. I know, Doug, that you guys, you were just saying, so you were just saying that you are still working with the T and the bus future to see what kind of buses will be available to run on this extension. I think, to Wig's point, one of the things that will really benefit this project really has, one of the advantages of this project is that it can be converted from bus rapid transit to light rail. Like, if an urban ring spur gets built to Sullivan Square or Wellington, but most likely Sullivan Square, one of the advantages of this project, depending on how it's built, is that these dedicated bus right-of-ways can be turned into bus and light rail right-of-ways, so that suddenly the Green Line can get to Chelsea. One of the things that would make this easier is, especially since the project already plugs into the Blue Line and the Orange Line 600-volt DC interconnect, is electrifying it at 600 volts with overhead wires. Especially since the current buses in the fleet are 600 volt capable. Has that been considered? Do you know?
We have not taken a direct look at that yet. Right now there is a plan, I believe, in place to procure a replacement fleet for the Silverline, which would not run on catenary, but that's not necessarily the fleet that would be assumed in our 2040 conditions. So we haven't exactly figured out what those assumptions will be yet. The bus facility modernization program is looking at, several years of bus procurement and reconstructing all of the maintenance facilities. So as we get a little bit further into this process and there's more clarity on what that future may potentially look like, we'll come to figure out or decide exactly what, for the purposes of our analysis, will be assumed about the vehicles. But we haven't looked at tying into the electrical infrastructure of the blue line or the orange line.
Thank you.
Unless anyone else has anything else, I'm going to ask one last question, but again, going once, going twice for anyone else. Okay, this is just kind of like a very high level. I wanted to ask this earlier on, but I didn't want to interrupt other people. It just at a very high level for planning the impact of projects like this. I understand that you have all this data on the the jobs, location of jobs, demographics, ethnic, underserved community data. Is there any way to sort of predict the impact on a project like this on the future growth in an area, like like the incredible growth we've seen along the SL3? Like as soon as it was announced, it seemed like there was new buildings going up 5 years before it was actually running. I mean, is there any modeling that is realistic to say, okay, well, if we do this based on what we know and based on what this region has done in the past, we might actually see this area boom up in terms of jobs and housing? And is there any way to predict the build it and they will come, or is it just too hard?
I am sure that there are consulting firms that offer that type of analysis and that service. They probably have models already developed that will do all of that analysis based on the, you give them all the inputs and they would give you that output. I would say predicting things like that is really difficult because the number of factors that are going to go into it are so variable. I mean, it's going to be dependent on local zoning, local policy, and economic conditions that, you can make assumptions about what that future state will look like. Wig, if you want to chime in, I think you're muted.
Well, I'm trying not to take up more than my fair share. My answer to Stefan would be it takes a lot of vision and long-term political leadership, and societal leadership. I'm not all on the politicians, but, kind of the regional thought leaders would have to be on that. And it's a big push, look at South Boston, how long it took. And because of the shortage caused by the big dig overruns, they ended up with Silverline when really they would have been better served by a diverted red line, which would have made it a lot easier longer term.
Yeah, I believe me, I get it. I mean, saying it's complicated and it takes consultants and paying them, that's a perfectly fine answer. I accept that, and thank you.
But to quickly answer your question, yes, you can make models that would show you what kind of potential or future could exist.
But I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like that's definitely out of scope for this project, and I think justifiably out of scope, because
correct,
there might not be any value in paying consultants the gazillion dollars to find out what we might already be able to guess. Anyway, enough on that.
Different consultants.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to suggest that we should wrap up the Silverline extension topic and let Doug go back to the real world. Thank you so much, Doug. This has been absolutely beyond any expectations that I had. Absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for answering all of our tough questions. Thank you for staying so late with us. Just
my pleasure.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you.
Very
thank you
valuable
all for engaging with us and for your thoughtful comments. I really appreciate it.
Cool. You can feel free to stay on to the rest of the meeting, but you don't
Thanks,
have to.
Doug.
Thanks.
You can sign off.
Bye-bye.
And,
Thank
and
you.
thanks to your dog too.
Of course, she was very well behaved. I think she's very sleepy, so that worked in my favor. Except for that one moment, of course. But yeah, sorry about that.
No complaints. No, that was fine.
All right. Have a good
Thanks
night,
so much.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks again. I've got 6:38. I am willing to take suggestions for how we use the remaining 22 minutes. Since
I'd say subcommittee and public comments.
I like that. Any complaints about that from anyone?
Briefly, I'd like to note the vertical line on the most recent commuter rail ridership graph.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to share something that you have?
I'll see if I can pull it up. Give me a second. But yeah,
Okay.
It's remarkable.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I would love to see that. Let me know if I should stop. Let me know if and when to stop sharing this stuff. Len, do you want to summarize or Wig, summarize the capital while I pull up my notes from marketing operations?
Well, I think not me. Anybody else would be better.
I'll be really quick with capital. So we did a brief dive into the operating budget for MBTA via the slide deck that was presented to the FMCB. So my goal is to see if I can get a more extensive operating budget through the advisory board. And if not, then we'll wait and see what the advisory board has to say about the budget and then report back from that. So that was pretty much it. I mean, some interesting things in the decks, but we don't really need to go into more detail about those at this point. Thank you. The decks to the FMCB, that is. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks. Anything else, or I'll do a quick summary of the.
Well, I would throw in those decks. There is going to be a pretty big project to prop up I-93 in Somerville. If folks aren't aware of that, it's projected to take 3 years. It's like Fast 14 was in Medford, except that one took 14 weekends. This one is expected to take 3 years.
Okay, let me throw into this screen, and I'll make it a little bit larger. Don't worry. Find control. There we go. I think 125% has worked in the past. How's that for?
It's good.
Everybody. Okay, I'm not going to go through all this. I'm just pretty much putting this up on the screen for posterity via YouTube recording and the Zoom recording. Our special guest was Anthony Thomas, along with Heather Hume and Terry Chan and Daniel Mueller. Big discussion of the policy for outdoor boarding and tappable media. Some details that I don't think I had heard about, including the tappable Charlie ticket as an interim between the all Charlie card, future to get us off of the Magstripe ticket, with the vending machines giving out this temporary tappable ticket interim. I guess I will stop talking and just.
The other thing was there was a really good discussion about fare evasion and how they handle that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. As my notes are showing, we had discussions of what happens if someone gives a false identity, talking about combating the any real or perceived bias by the fair verification agents, the training that's going to go into it, the visibility of them. Are they going to be out in plain sight? The answer was yes. The fair verification agents are going to be very easy to spot. The idea is that they're not going to be trying to hide and spring out and, oh, gotcha. No, they're going to enter the vehicle, check everybody, and leave or stay on. But everybody gets checked, and it's going to be very obvious. And which, speaking for myself, I don't think I'd remembered from before, the fair verification agents are going to have an extended role also as customer service, just general customer service agents to ask questions, directions, just the same kind of thing as the current, I'm forgetting the term for the staff that's currently in rapid transit stations with the red. There's a term for that, and I'm embarrassed I can't remember it. Customer service folks. And then we got into some interesting bits from Josh about the reline routes for the extension, the air rights project around Hines, and then invite for May about SLX. Done. Craig's off the line. Oh no, Craig is still here. Craig, I'm just going to say Mattapan line PCC so that we can maintain a track record of batting 1,000 for mentioning it. I can stop there because it's coming up on quarter of, unless you want to add something, Craig or Len or Jacob.
I've got the thing. It looks like this is from Streets Blog's Twitter account. I can't find, I looked through most of the slides from the FMCB meeting that I think it's from, but I couldn't find this graph. So sorry for the low resolution, but here it is. I'm going to share my screen now.
Please do.
Here it is. So if you will, can you see the blue line that's here?
Yep,
so
that
note
works.
this. This is right around here is around the time that the commuter rail switched from a rush hour based schedule to a clock facing hourly kind of schedule. Right here-ish.
Wow.
Note that.
That is compelling.
Not sure if I can wait, hang on. I can barely make out the dates down here. Yeah, so this is
just going to ask you if you could give us just an estimate of what the time scale is.
Yeah, this here where my mouse is right here, this is April 5th. So since April 5th, it looks like commuter rail ridership has increased. Well, I need to find the high res version of this, but yeah, it looks like it's just been a 45-degree line since April 5th.
That is compelling. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah. So also, have you guys seen the? Speaking of, I can share the regional rail transformation updates slides, which are really cool, and we should check them out. Can I pull those up real quick?
Do you want to do that now? I mean,
yeah,
unless
I can.
Unless anyone has any public comment, or unless there's anything in the area of external meetings, new business, old business, other business. I mean, we could continue talking about this right until the end. Barry seems to be watching by YouTube. I'm watching the chat on YouTube. So Barry, if you want to type in something for public comment, or if anyone else who's on YouTube wants to. Otherwise, please continue, Jacob.
Okay, so I stopped screen sharing the other thing. So I'm going to screen share. This is an actual MBTA slide deck from the MBTA FMCB meeting on the 24th. So here we go. This is the rail transformation regional rail update slide deck if you go to the MBTA's website. So brief note that's not in this deck, which was in the slide deck we looked at during the last what subcommittee was it? The CIF meeting, the most recent capital budget says that the T is planning to hire a full-time regional rail coordinator and another person who's going to implement regional rail, two very high-level, six-figure salaried kind of positions. So that's looking real good for this project. This slide deck is looking at the types of EMUs, electric multiple units, that are available that the T could procure for service on the Providence-Stoughton line. So it looks like they're looking at two variations. If you look at here, they're looking at the Caltrain version of the Stadler KISS EMU and an alternative for comparison, Bombardier Alstom multi-level. So this one is very compelling for regions that we'll go into in the slides, but this is the one that they're building for Caltrain, and this is the kinds of EMU New Jersey Transit is expected to order a buttload of these things. So we will be able to glom onto the contract if that goes according to plan. This also has the advantage of there being compatible with our existing bi-level commuter rail coaches. So basically those could be dragged along as trailers in a set of a couple regular EMU bi-level coaches, which would be really convenient if it actually works, which everyone expects it to. So these are the things they're looking for as to what the EMU should have. So yeah, horizontal clearance. Does it fit in the corridor? Does it work with our signaling? Does it work on? Does it work? So this is the compatibility summary. So option A is the KISS Stadler Caltrain unit, and option B is the Bombardier Alstom multi-level that NJT wants to use. So if you notice this,
that just jumped out at me. Vertical incompatible, that's like a showstopper, isn't it?
Yeah, so basically option A, we would need 20 wire adjustments, and 33 bridges would need additional electrical protection in order to run KISS units. And if we were running NJT multi-levels, only 3 wire adjustments would need to happen, and no bridges would need to be adjusted.
Oh, okay, but that's adding bridge protection. No, that doesn't say anything about actually redesigning or changing the bridges, right?
Technically it would be that.
Oh.
I'm not exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I think general it says vertical and horizontal clearance.
Yeah.
So that's bad.
Well,
I agree with that. I'm sorry. I agree with Jacob on how interesting this presentation is and his choice.
I think that from this document, it would look like the one advantage of the Stadler KISS units is that they might be available faster, maybe. If you note, if you've been following the progress of the Caltrain modernization program, the Stadler has built a factory in Utah, I think, and has just the first complete EMU set has been to the transportation, the TTCI testing center in Pueblo, Colorado, and has been undergoing high-speed testing. So basically, that's the advantage it has. Also, I think this might be a story. I think what is happening. So the KISS units have double-level doors. They have a door on the lower level for low-level platforms, and a door on the second level. Hello, for the high-level platforms. And I think that to maintain compatibility with California high-speed rail, the high-level platform door is actually at a different height than 48 inches, which is the one that the MBTA uses. So it's possible that they'd have to redesign the entire shell of the coach just to get 3 extra inches of door height, but I'm not sure. So that might be a strike against the available now, which is the one real advantage that option A has. So it seems like, yeah, so this is the summary for what they want to use. It seems like however requires significant modifications, definitely seems like a strike against the KISS units. So it's quite probably will end up, if we end up piloting EMUs, we will pilot, if we end up procuring EMUs, we might end up with the NJT Alstom multi-levels.
Jacob, thank you for giving us that. I personally hadn't had a chance to even pull up the FMCB page since it happened yesterday. So that was excellent summary of what is hot off the press. Thank you.
And these things match really well with larger and larger offshore wind contracts that are being let by the state.
There's also, I looked on the FMCB slide decks. There looks like it looks like there's some South Coast Rail updates as well. I haven't reviewed those though, so I don't think I should present on them.
We are coming up on, we are at 7 minutes before 7. I think I owe it to everyone to say that coming up in the May meeting, sorry, this is the May meeting. Coming up in the June meeting, we will be needing to elect new co-chairs for beginning in July. I'll just say I'm happy to continue, but that Len, unless I'm forgetting something, is mentioning that we have to do co-chair elections next month. All we need to do for today. Go ahead, Jacob.
Real quick thing, I have some pictures pulled up. So if you want to see pictures for option A and option B for EMUs, I can share my screen real quick and I can do like 10 seconds of that.
I don't mind 10 seconds.
Great, here we go. Okay. Here, so this is option A. This is a Stadler KISS electric multiple unit under testing for Caltrain. You note the low-level doors here and the high-level doors here. This is a promotional rendering of the NJT multi-level EMU. So if you'll note here, actually, this front coach here is an unpowered trailer, or at least doesn't have its pantograph up. And this is the EMU coach. Note the sort of at least visual similarity to the existing commuter rail bilevels. And there we go. Anyone want to stare at these for another second?
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Well, let me go back to, we've been, we were very generous with the solar line presentation. We did cover committee reports in a hurried fashion, but we did. Is there anything, Len, from the other organization, the acronym, I'm having acronym soup.
MPO?
Thank you, yes.
Oh, no, nothing compelling. No, so.
All right. Any old business, new business, or final comments, since we're at 5 of Craig, Carl, you've been kind of quiet, which is fine. I just want to make sure that you have the opportunity to say anything before we wrap up.
Yes, one quick thing, Mattapan high-speed line.
Ah, very good. The drinking game should have commenced earlier. But Carl, were you were the two of you were talking just quickly over each other? Carl, did you say you're all set?
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, I do actually want to. Other than just saying it randomly, here's my random tie-in. The Dropkick Murphys, local band, in their new album, they in one of the songs they actually reference the high speed line. So it's now album famous.
All right, remind me to buy that album just to support anybody who's mentioning Mattapan high speed line.
Exactly.
Carl, was there anything else? I see you unmuted again.
Nothing to add, thanks.
Okay, cool. Just being careful. Jacob, I give you the floor again, and then we're going to be close to calling it a night. I will make another check of YouTube for any chat comments from Barry or anyone else. Go ahead, Jacob.
just it's time to go. But the other day I asked a question that you said would be better asked to Dave Carney, director of bus operations. It was about some of the new wire persons that were hired for the Green Line extension. And I don't have his email. So if you could, and you wanted to be CC'd on that, you and Len. So if you could make sure to get me his email, that would be great.
Sorry, I missed it. Was it Dave Carney's email or someone else's email?
Dave Carney's email.
Dave Carney's himself.
Dave
I will
Carney
send you
himself.
that. Yep.
Or Dave Carney himself.
You got it.
Thanks.
Wig, do you want to close us out?
No, but I guess we're all set.
Oh, unless I think forgetting to ask Emily if there's any news you want to share
exactly.
or anything noteworthy at all.
We're working on a lot of stuff, but not quite ready yet. I feel like I've been teasing the same thing I have in my mind every time, but it'll wrap up at the end of July, and then it'll be really enticing, I promise. So.
And then you'll be able to
Sounds
get some more
good.
sleep, hopefully.
Quick question. I would love to understand what it is you guys do at the CTPS, and or how maybe potentially I could be employed there, potentially in 10 years. So if
Hey, Jacob.
could we share?
Jacob,
Yeah.
Jacob, that's out of scope.
Okay,
So
sorry.
we'll take that one offline. You know, so yeah. So next,
Go to an MPO meeting, and you can
Yeah.
hear more about what we do.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem in the subcommittee. We can ask Jonathan about CTPS. I mean,
it was a job part that was getting.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. Yeah, but Jacob, asking that question is fine. It's better to ask, and we'll say no if it's not appropriate than to not ask.
Thanks.
And I would just say I'm really out of date with regard to the MPO and CTPS, but I think they're a phenomenal staff in all of my interactions with them over the years, which is 10 whole years of going to meetings.
Hear, hear. Yes. Thank you, Emily, for everything that you do.
I would definitely, the MPO meetings are up on the YouTube account for the MPO, and I would start there. And if you want any transit specific things, I could highlight where we've made some presentations recently. But I would need to refer to a calendar for that. So there's also the MPO calendar online.
Sounds good. I'm willing to entertain a motion to adjourn for the evening.
To adjourn. From
And I'll second it myself. So, Barry, I hope you were able to at least participate by watching. Barry's computer seems to be acting up more and more often, unfortunately, but hopefully he was at least able to watch and absorb. Craig, who won the game?
Oh, it was more like a skills clinic, so no winner. But it was thanks for entertaining me while I was outside.
Yep. Carl, thanks for joining us, and Emily, Len, Jacob, Wig, thank you all.
So long, guys.
I will call it a night.
Yeah, Stefan, thanks for all your technical leadership too.
It gets easier every time.
So long.
Thank you. I'm going to end all this. Good night, everybody.